She found the man dead in her kitchen 2 mornings after she had sworn she would never return. Lena Voss froze in the doorway, a coffee mug trembling in her hand, as the world shrank to the impossible silence of tile and blood. His eyes were still open, unblinking, and his stiff fingers clutched a folded scrap of paper with her name written across it. In that instant, every excuse she had made for coming back home, the letter from the estate lawyer, the faded hope of closure, the lie that she could escape her past, crumbled into dust. At 18, Lena had left this small town with nothing but a backpack and her stubborn promise that she would never be trapped again by its secrets. She had wandered for years through cities that did not care who she was, through jobs that demanded nothing of her heart, through relationships she always left before they could hurt her. She thought distance meant freedom, but she learned that running only muffled the noise. The past was patient. The past waited. Now it stood on her kitchen floor. Her flaws were small, ordinary things that grew teeth when left unattended. A habit of walking away when people needed her most, a quick temper disguised as self-defense, a selfishness she justified as survival. She knew she was not brave, not truly. But she also knew she could not stand here staring at a dead man and pretend she had no part in this. Her phone rested on the counter. The screen cracked, waiting for her to dial 911. She reached for it, then stopped. Police meant exposure, and Lena had spent her life hiding. If the note in the man's hand was meant for her, then someone else would know soon enough. Her first instinct was to call her brother, but she hadn't spoken to him in months. Shame stopped her finger. Instead, she whispered into the quiet, "Why here? Why me?" The note was brief. "I needed you to remember me. Forgive me." The words struck her like a stone to the chest. Somewhere in her memory, beneath layers of dust and denial, something stirred. Night at 19 when she signed a paper she didn't understand. A boy's face she couldn't quite recall. The echo of promises made in desperation. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the weight of it wasn't. A knock at the door startled her. Mrs. Calder from across the hall peeked in with nervous eyes. "Everything all right, dear? Thought I heard something." Lena forced a smile, told her everything was fine, and closed the door before the older woman could see. She leaned against it, heart hammering. Already the walls felt too thin. Already she could sense the rumors circling. Later, an officer came not because Lena called, but because someone else had. He asked the usual questions. How did she know him? Where had she been last night? Did she notice anything unusual? Lena gave half answers, carefully measured. She wasn't lying exactly, but she wasn't telling the truth either. He wrote her words down like numbers in a ledger. When he left, she felt smaller, diminished by suspicion. The man's name, she learned, was Eric Hollis. He was no stranger to the town. He had volunteered at the community center, helped struggling kids with homework, raised money for programs no one else cared about. A man like that shouldn't have ended up in her kitchen. Yet, somehow, their lives had crossed before. Lena felt it in her bones. That night, sleep betrayed her. She dreamed of being younger, sitting at a long table with children, signing her name on something while adults whispered around her. In the dream, Eric was there, smiling, and when she looked down the paper had only 3 words, "You owe us." She woke with her heart hammering, convinced the dream was less fantasy than memory. Unable to rest, she went to the community center. The building smelled of dust, chalk, and lemon cleaner. She hesitated at the threshold, certain everyone inside would see her as guilty, as dangerous. Still, she walked in. The walls seemed unchanged, yet the air felt heavier, as if holding its breath. Behind an old cupboard, she found it, a ledger bound in worn leather. The pages were filled with names, numbers, and notes written in crooked hands. People had recorded debts, favors, and promises made in quiet back rooms. It was the sort of book towns kept hidden, the kind that told more truth than anyone wanted spoken aloud. Her stomach tightened when she found her own name. Lena Voss -2007. Promise signed. Payment owed. The line was vague, but the sight of it made her throat close. She remembered now. At 19, broke and desperate to prove she could belong somewhere, she had agreed to help, a promise to volunteer, maybe more. Then she left. She never looked back. The dead man in her kitchen had been part of this. Maybe protecting it, maybe warning her, maybe demanding she pay what she owed. Shame spread through her like fire. She had left people behind who counted on her, children who remembered promises she broke, a community she abandoned. She wanted to tell herself she had no responsibility, but the truth sat heavy in her chest. She had been part of something, and walking away hadn't erased it. That night, she sat at her kitchen table, staring at the folded note. Fear wrestled with resolve. She knew someone had killed Eric, and she knew it had something to do with what was written in that ledger. She also knew the police could not protect her from secrets. For the first time in years, Lena stopped running. She wasn't brave. She wasn't steady. But she was tired of being a ghost in her own story. If the past had come back for her, she would face it, even if it meant walking into shadows deeper than she could imagine. The next morning, Lena woke to the hollow thump of mail sliding through the slot. Her stomach tightened even before she moved. The night had left her restless and aching, haunted by the image of Eric's open eyes and the ledger's rough pages. She shuffled to the door and bent to pick up the single envelope. Her name was scrawled in the same jagged handwriting as the note found in Eric's hand. No stamp, no return address. Her fingers trembled as she tore it open. You know what you owe. Meet me where the river bends at dusk. Come alone. The river. She hadn't been there in over a decade, not since she left this town with nothing but a bus ticket and a half-empty backpack. Memories of that night came in fragments, the glint of streetlights on water, the damp smell of moss, the distant hum of crickets. She had never understood why she left so suddenly. Now it felt as though the river had been waiting for her to come back. She spent the day moving like a shadow through her own apartment, afraid to turn on the television or check her phone. The news already carried whispers about Eric's death. Some reports hinted at foul play, others implied a suicide. She hated both versions. They erased the truth she hadn't yet uncovered. At noon, the doorbell rang. Lena's heart leapt, then steadied when she saw her brother, Joel, standing in the hallway. He looked older, his face sharper from years of work and worry, but his eyes softened when they met hers. "Thought you'd never come back," he said. "Then I heard about Eric." "I didn't," she began, but Joel raised a hand. "I know. I don't think you did, but people are talking." They always do. They sat across from each other at the small kitchen table. Joel stirred his coffee with slow, deliberate movements, as if the rhythm could slow the racing of his own thoughts. "You remember the center?" he asked. "I went there yesterday," she admitted. "Found the ledger." "My name was in it." Joel's expression didn't change, but his eyes flickered. "I was afraid of that." "You knew?" "I knew there were promises made. I didn't know what they were." Eric was part of it, though. He never left this town. He stayed when the rest of us drifted away. He kept trying to fix things, even when it cost him. Lena lowered her gaze. "And I walked away." Joel's voice softened. "We all make choices we regret." The conversation left her raw, but also steadier. She had expected anger from her brother, maybe blame, but instead he offered a quiet acceptance that felt heavier than judgment. When dusk neared, Lena walked to the river. The air smelled of wet earth and fallen leaves. The sky bruised itself into deep purple and gold. She paused on the narrow path, realizing how small the town had become in her absence, how the trees still leaned over the water like curious sentinels. A figure waited at the bend, half hidden by the tall reeds. As she approached, she saw it was a woman, thin, pale, with eyes that looked as though they had not closed in days. Her hands clutched a small, weathered book. "You came," the woman said. Her voice was hoarse, almost broken. "Who are you?" Lena asked. The woman's lips trembled. "Maris. I was a child at the center. Eric, he saved us more times than I can count. But he couldn't save himself." Lena's chest tightened. "Why send the letter?" "Because I don't trust the police, and because you left. You were part of this once, and you need to understand what happened." Maris opened the book and held it out. The pages were brittle, covered in scribbled notes and faded photographs of children with names written beneath them. Lena saw her own younger face in one corner, wide-eyed and uncertain. "This is what Eric kept," Maris said. "Proof of what was promised and what was broken. He thought if you saw it, you might help. But someone found out. That's why he's gone." Lena turned the pages with trembling fingers. There were notes about missing funds, about a group that had quietly controlled the center for years, demanding loyalty from the desperate in exchange for help. She remembered now the adults whispering about debts, the strange papers they'd asked her to sign, the uneasy smiles. "Who killed him?" Lena asked. Maris looked away. "I don't know, but I know they won't stop. They think Eric left something behind, and maybe he did. That's why you're not safe." The river murmured beside them like an old witness. Lena felt the weight of the book in her hands, as if it were more than paper and ink. It was proof that the shadows she had tried to outrun were real, and they had names. "I can't do this alone," Lena said. Maris's eyes met hers. "You don't have to. But you can't run anymore." They walked back together, the book pressed against Lena's chest as if it were a fragile heart. Streetlights flickered to life, casting long shadows over cracked pavement. Lena realized that for the first time since she'd returned, she felt less alone. When she reached her apartment, she found the front door slightly ajar. Her pulse quickened. Joel was inside, sitting stiffly on the couch, a frown etched across his face. "Someone's been here," he said. "The place was like this when I arrived." Lena's eyes swept the room. Nothing seemed stolen, but a single drawer in the desk had been pulled open. The ledger from the center lay where she'd left it, but the note Eric had clutched was gone. "They're looking for something," Lena whispered. Joel glanced at the book in her hands. Then, whatever that is, it just became dangerous. Outside, a car engine started and drove off into the night. The sound lingered like an echo of a warning. For the first time, Lena felt a thin edge of resolve harden in her chest. She had spent years believing she was too flawed, too broken to confront what she'd left behind. But Eric had died trying to protect something worth saving, and she owed him more than silence. "We find out who did this," she said. "We find out what they're hiding, and we finish what Eric started." Joel nodded. "Then we start now." Rain swept across the small town as if trying to wash away its secrets. Lena stood by the window, watching droplets slide down the glass like racing thoughts. The air was cool, and the quiet inside her apartment was too brittle to last. Joel sat at the kitchen table, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, staring at the weather-stained book Maris had given them. "They came here for the note," he said. "Means it mattered more than the ledger." Lena turned from the window. "The note was about me, That's why they wanted it gone. If the police find it, it ties me to Eric. Joel shook his head. Or it ties Eric to whoever killed him. We need to know what it said that we don't already know. Lena felt the sharp tug of regret. She had read it so many times she could almost see the ink still bleeding on the paper. I needed you to remember me. Forgive me. The words were too personal to make sense. I don't think the note was a threat, she said. It was a warning. Or maybe a confession. Joel rubbed his temples. Either way, someone's willing to kill to erase it. That afternoon, they returned to the community center. Maris waited by the old wooden door, her expression drawn and cautious. She led them to a storage room in the basement that smelled of dust and mildew. A single bulb swayed overhead. I thought you should see this, Maris said. She unwrapped a small tin box she had kept hidden under a floorboard. Inside lay a handful of newspaper clippings, a few yellowed letters, and a single photograph. The photograph showed Eric standing beside a man Lena didn't recognize, tall, with sharp features and eyes that seemed to pierce the camera. On the back of the photo, written in the same jagged script as the letter and note, were the words, "The one who still holds the debt. Who is he?" Lena asked. Maris's voice trembled. His name's Calder. He ran the center years ago. Left when the money dried up. At least that's what everyone thought. But Eric believed Calder never really left. Said he still pulled the strings from somewhere else. Joel frowned. And Eric thought Lena could help bring him down. Maris nodded. She was there in the beginning. She knows more than she realizes. Lena felt the old shame and unease stir inside her. She tried to remember Calder, but the memory wouldn't sharpen. If he's behind this, why not go after Eric directly before? Maybe Eric found something, Maris said. Or maybe he tried to walk away. They packed the box and the book into Joel's backpack. As they left the center, Lena noticed a black car parked across the street. Its windows were tinted, the engine off, yet she felt eyes on her. She forced herself not to look back as they walked. That night, Joel insisted she stay at his small house on the edge of town. The rain hadn't let up, and the distant roll of thunder sounded like an echo of the tension in her chest. They sat on the worn sofa, the book and box laid out on the coffee table. Lena traced her finger along the photograph's edge. I used to think I left this town because it was too small for me. But maybe I left because I was afraid of what I saw. Afraid of how easily I'd signed away my own voice. Joel's gaze softened. Running doesn't make you weak. But coming back facing this, that's not the Lena I remember. That's stronger. She almost smiled but stopped when a sharp knock rattled the door. Joel exchanged a glance with her before standing up. He opened the door only a few inches. On the porch stood a man in a soaked dark coat, his gray-streaked hair plastered to his forehead. "Lena Voss?" the man asked. Joel blocked the view with his shoulder. "Who's asking?" "My name's Detective Hayes. I'm leading the investigation into Eric Hollis's death." "I think Miss Voss has something to tell me." Lena stepped forward, keeping her voice steady. "What makes you think that?" "Because Eric left your name in his final message." Hayes's eyes shifted briefly to the backpack on the table. "And because someone broke into your apartment." "That's no coincidence." Joel hesitated, then opened the door wider. Hayes stepped in, shaking rain from his coat. His presence filled the small living room with a quiet authority. "I'm not here to arrest anyone," he said, "but I need you to understand something. Whoever killed Eric is watching both of you. They know Eric was keeping records." Lena studied Hayes's face. There was something guarded there, but also a glimmer of genuine concern. "We don't know who we can trust," she said. "Then trust that I want the truth," Hayes replied. For the next hour they laid out what they had: the ledger, the book from Maris, the photograph, the scraps of memory Lena carried. Hayes listened without interruption, occasionally jotting down notes in a small leather notebook. When they finished, he closed the notebook with a snap. "This Calder, if he's alive and still connected, will need proof." "And that proof might be dangerous to find," Joel asked. "So what do we do?" "Stay somewhere safe. Don't talk to anyone who comes asking questions, and let me dig into Calder's records," Hayes said. He gave them his card, then added, "But be careful. If Eric died trying to protect something, the people responsible won't hesitate again." After Hayes left, the house felt quieter but not safer. Lena stood by the window, watching rain blur the streetlights into shimmering halos. She thought about Eric, his gentle smile, the weight he must have carried alone, the way he'd reached out to her even in death. For years, she had told herself that walking away meant freedom. Now she understood it had only been a different kind of chain. She was done being silent. Joel came to stand beside her. "We can still walk away," he said quietly. "Leave this place. Start over somewhere else." Lena shook her head. "If we leave now, we leave Eric's death unanswered. We leave Maris and the others still living under Calder's shadow. We can't." Joel sighed, but didn't argue. The storm outside rattled the windows, but the decision between them felt solid. In the corner, the small tin box seemed to hum with the weight of secrets yet to be revealed. Somewhere in those pages and photographs lay the reason Eric had died and the reason Lena could no longer run. She whispered, as much to herself as to her brother, "Tomorrow we find Calder." The storm passed during the night, leaving the town damp and hushed as if holding its breath. By dawn, Lena and Joel were already on the move. They had barely slept, their nerves stretched taut by the weight of what lay ahead. Detective Hayes had called just before sunrise. His voice was urgent but steady. "I found an address. Calder owns an old warehouse near the freight yard. If he's still pulling strings, that's where we'll find proof." Joel drove, his hands tight on the wheel. Lena sat beside him, clutching the worn photograph of Eric and Calder. The roads shimmered with puddles and morning mist. She thought of Eric, how his kindness had been stronger than the town's rot, and felt a sharp resolve harden in her chest. The warehouse loomed at the edge of the freight yard, a sagging relic of brick and steel framed by the gray sky. Its windows were boarded up, and weeds clawed through the cracked concrete. Hayes waited near a rusted side door, speaking quietly into his radio before greeting them. "Backup's 10 minutes out," he said. "But if Calder's here, we can't give him time to disappear." The three entered through the side door. Inside, the warehouse smelled of damp wood and oil. Pale light seeped through broken panes above, cutting dusty shafts across the concrete floor. Stacked crates lined the walls like silent sentries. They moved cautiously, the sound of their footsteps muffled by years of dust. At the far end of the warehouse, a faint light glowed beneath a half-open office door. Hayes raised a hand, signaling them to stay back, then pushed the door wider. Inside sat a man at a scarred wooden desk. His hair was white now, but the sharp angles of his face were unmistakable Calder. He didn't seem surprised to see them. "You finally came back, Lena Voss," he said, his voice gravelly yet calm. "I wondered how long it would take." Lena felt her pulse quicken, but stepped forward. "You killed Eric." Calder's lips twitched in something between a smile and a sneer. Eric was weak. He thought the past could be washed clean. He was wrong. Hayes's voice cut in, firm. "You're under investigation for murder and for running an illegal operation through the community center." "It's over." Calder leaned back in his chair. "You think you can prove anything? The records you have are fragments. They don't tell the whole story. Lena's gaze shifted to a locked filing cabinet behind him. Maybe they don't, but what's in there does. Calder's eyes followed hers, and for the first time a shadow of concern crossed his face. He stood abruptly. "You should have stayed gone, Lena. You were never strong enough for this." Joel stepped in front of his sister, but Hayes moved faster, drawing his service weapon. "Sit down," the detective ordered. For a tense heartbeat, no one moved. Then Calder sank back into the chair, his bravado slipping. Hayes nodded to Lena. "Check the cabinet." Her fingers trembled as she tried the handle, but it was locked. Joel found a rusted crowbar among the crates and pried the drawer open with a metallic crack. Inside lay a stack of ledgers, sealed envelopes, and a bundle of photographs tied with fraying twine. Lena leafed through them quickly. The documents detailed decades of siphoned funds, names of local officials who had been bribed, records of threats made against anyone who resisted. And near the bottom, she found a letter written by Eric himself. "If you're reading this, it means I failed to stop him. Don't let my death be in vain. The children deserved better. The truth is yours to carry forward." Her throat tightened as she held the letter. She had left once because she believed she couldn't make a difference. Now she understood that Eric had believed in her even when she hadn't believed in herself. Hayes collected the evidence, his expression grim but determined. "This is enough to bring him down." Calder spoke again, his voice low, almost weary. "You think the truth changes anything? The people who paid me will just find another man. That's the way of the world." Lena looked at him steadily. "Maybe, but it ends for you." The sound of approaching sirens cut through the heavy air. Hayes radioed the incoming officers. Joel exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. When the police took Calder away in handcuffs, he didn't look back. Lena stood in the warehouse's doorway, watching as he was led into a waiting car. The morning sun pierced the mist, painting gold along the horizon. For the first time in years, the weight on her chest eased. Outside, Hayes turned to her. "You did more than you think. Eric would be proud." Lena managed a small, genuine smile. "I hope so." As they walked away from the warehouse, Lena felt the tremor in her hands slowly subside. She had faced the ghosts of her past, not because she was fearless, but because she was finally tired of being afraid. That evening, back at Joel's house, they sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by the evidence boxes. Maris joined them, her thin face softening with cautious relief. "Will it be enough?" she asked. Hayes nodded. "It's solid. There'll be a trial, and a long one. But Calder won't walk away from this." Lena looked at the faces around her, Joel's steady presence, Hayes's quiet determination, Maris's fragile hope. For the first time, she felt the stirrings of something like peace. Not because everything was fixed, but because she had chosen to stand and face it. That night, Lena stepped outside. The sky was clear and speckled with stars, the air cool against her skin. She thought of Eric again, of the children whose names filled the old ledgers, of the girl she had been when she ran away. She whispered into the quiet, "We'll finish what you started." A distant train whistle echoed through the night. She turned back toward the house, ready to help rebuild what had been broken. Then, addressing the camera of the documentary crew that would later tell her story, or the countless unseen viewers who would hear it, Lena said softly but with conviction, "If there's something your past still holds over you, don't keep running. Face it, because hiding only lets the wrong people keep their power. And if this story moved you, don't let it end here. Subscribe, share it, and tell someone else why the truth still matters."